Welcome to the Teachers on Fire podcast, where I profile agents of growth and transformation in education today. Each guest shares their highs, their lows, their passions, their goals, and the resources that are shaping their thinking and inspiring their practice. For show notes and links from each episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, please do subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode is brought to you by ClassTime.com, an assessment platform that delivers learning insights, giving you more time to teach. ClassTime helps you gain immediate visibility of your students' learning progress, build engaging lessons, share with other teachers, and create your own tech-enabled questions to complement your lesson plans. ClassTime.com also helps you engage all students with collaborative challenges and puzzles that make fun an integral part of the learning experience. Check out ClassTime.com and start for free today. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Let's meet today's guest. Today, I'm speaking with Jeffery Frieden. Jeffery is a teacher, blogger, presenter, and podcaster. He enjoys connecting teachers and building professional relationships in order to intensify impact on learning. He is also the author of Make Them Process It, Uncovering New Value in the Writer's Notebook, published in 2017. You can follow Jeffery on Twitter at Make Them Master It. That's no E in master, so Make Them Master It. And visit his blog at makethemmasterit.com and listen to his podcast at Dear Teacher, Don't Give Up. Jeffery, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Are you ready to talk education?
I am always ready to talk education, Tim.
Well, Jeffery, I'm so excited to speak with you. I mean, we've been connected for well over a year. I've been following your stuff, reading your blog, listening to your podcast, and now we are speaking in real time. So this is super exciting for me. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your current context in education? What does that look like?
Yeah, and before I jump into that, I've been listening to your podcast too, and I love the lineup of teachers that you have. They've been helping me out and giving me perspective in my classroom and in my profession too. But a little bit about me. I teach in Riverside, California, and that's actually one of your previous guests, Aaron Blackwelder. That's his hometown. So about the time that I came, he left. So I'm sorry, Riverside, that gem left. I feel kind of responsible for that. I teach at Hillcrest High School. It's a younger high school in a smaller district in our area. At least we're surrounded by bigger districts, Alvord Unified School District. And our demographics of our community at our school are fairly representative of what I experience in the area that I live. So we have about 1,800 students. Approximately 60% are on free reduced lunch. But we also have a wide spectrum of socioeconomic statuses there, from people who have plenty of money to people who are hurting for money. And then when it comes to race, it looks a lot like California in most areas in Southern California, at least. Primarily Hispanic, about 64%, white population about 18%, and then Asian and Black population 6 and 7%. And then we have several other communities represented too. The one district role that I have, I describe myself as a recovering department chair, which we'll get to later on. But I do one thing for the district. I'm a point of contact for this inter-district collaboration. So there's 3 districts in our area, and we're working with a local community college to get students ready for reading and writing demands at the college level. And so I participate in that.
You are an English authority, and I look forward to connecting more about that, as you mentioned. I feel like I have so much further to go, even after teaching English for as many years as I have. But first of all, Jeffery, if you are a fan of the show, you know what comes next. It's story time, and it's interesting. As I surveyed listeners a few months ago, this segment came up over and over again as one of the most encouraging and inspiring parts of the show. So please share with us about a low moment or an experience of adversity that you faced somewhere in your teaching or education journey, and describe how you overcame it.
I'm going to try and take both together. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about a low moment for me because I had not experienced a lot of adversity. So this actually goes back to before I was a classroom teacher, like the guy at the front of the room teaching the students. And I was working as a teacher assistant at a non-public school that served the population of students that were, everyone there was severely emotionally disturbed. And so one of the things that I learned right away getting there is I met the teacher, Mrs. Walters, who had tons of experience in education. And one of the things that she was noticing right away for me was that my background was, I'm a white boy from the burbs. And it was not connecting with the population that we were serving, that there was a lot of different populations and their backgrounds were very different than mine, without getting into their stories, but they had some rough upbringings, seen a lot of things that people shouldn't see as adults, but they were seeing these as kids. And at one point, I was working with another teacher there, and next door was Mrs. Walters' room, and there was some noise coming from that room. And I asked the teacher that I was working with, like, do you want me to go over there and ask him to quiet down? And she said, oh yeah, it's kind of distracting. So I went over there and I basically just said, like, hey, can you guys quiet down? And left the room. And what I didn't know is at the time, she was rewarding her students, something that they had planned based on, they set a goal, they'd reached their goal and they'd achieved it, and they were doing this reward. And I just went over there and just basically said, like, hey, don't do that thing that you've worked hard to earn. So later on, she pulled me in the class at the end of the day. And man, she let me have it. She went into like, man, look at how hard these kids have worked. They really earned this. You know how hard it is to get. It was a challenge to get students at the particular school to see value in learning and hitting a goal. And she was a motivator, and she really got them to want to earn it. And I came in and, put it down right in front of them. And so she just said, you need to really learn and get yourself educated about these communities that you did not grow up in and don't know much about. And man, I was just completely floored. I felt awful. I think I wallowed for like a week afterwards and had one of those moments where I was like, I don't even want to show my face around here anymore. Because I'm sure people heard that reaming through the walls. So, but after about a week, I decided to pick myself up. And I was like, she made a lot of really good points. And after a week, I was like, she's not mad at me, or she was mad. But she was actually doing a loving thing by kind of getting through some of the barriers I had set up for myself. And so I went and started reading, which meant I had to go to the college library and check out books and start reading on these different populations that I was just getting to know. And over time, I really started to open my eyes to, you know what, I have like a really privileged background that I grew up in. And I need to start really opening my eyes to what's going on with the students around me and things like that. And so when I moved on to actually teach, first subbing and then teaching, that was something I started to really pay attention to, was the backgrounds of my students. And I really owe that to Mrs. Walters taking the time to chew me out in the most loving way possible. So thank you, Mrs. Walters.
Well, I mean, was it the most loving way possible? I get that you're grateful for that experience, and certainly it was course correcting for you. But I mean, if you were to deliver the same chastisement, would you do it in a different way?
Well, everyone's different. And the way that I'm wired, I guess, a swift kick in the pants sometimes is the best way to teach me. So, yes, I think Mrs. Walters, whether she intended to or not, she picked the right way to deliver the message.
Well, thanks for that story, Jeffrey. That is obviously was eye-opening for you. And I think many of us in education, when it comes to equity and diversity, we do need to have that wake-up call. And sometimes it needs to come in almost a violent way. And I had one of those moments myself a few months ago where someone called me out on something that I thought I was doing quite innocently. And it has certainly opened my eyes. So I appreciate that moment from Mrs. Walters. Thanks for sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your podcast, Jeffrey. Dear Teacher, Don't Give Up. I feel like I've listened to most of your episodes and certainly appreciate your common sense, your no fluff approach to managing our calling as educators in human and sustainable ways. So tell us more about why you launched this podcast. What is your mission and who should tune in?
All right. Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I jump into the why. It'll be more about what my experiences leading up to it. So when I came into education, all of the professional development I attended and the books that I read for professional development presented this Grecian urn as if it were the standard, which is something that's even for me as a teacher with my students, I've realized I've been doing too, is you kind of present the A, like, hey, this is what we're supposed to do. This is the top-notch exemplar. And when it came to like teaching, the people who were presenting it, they really believed in it. And they were saying like, and we all want to be a good teacher, right? And so the idea was that if you're not doing these things, you're not doing teaching correctly, or you're not right. And there was no talk then at the time of growing into those things too. But I was struggling. I struggled as a teacher to do all those things. And when I talk to other teachers, they're struggling too. And the people that are presenting this information, they're polished in their craft. And so I see where I am, I see where they are, and I see the gap. And it's, for lack of a better term, demoralizing sometimes. It also can create burnout as you try to kind of close that gap. So what I'm trying to do with Dear Teacher, Don't Give Up is like the question you just asked me about that low moment is I kind of want to take teachers who look really polished right now and people are going to their work or they when they meet this person, they say, wow, you're a great teacher. I want to find their story about, yeah, but did you ever hit quit point? Did you ever hit to the point where you were thinking, I don't know if this is for me? Where am I really a teacher? And take us to that moment and like how you handled that moment, because a lot of teachers live there at some point in their career. They experience that. I don't think I've met a teacher yet who said like, no, there hasn't been a day where I've thought about quitting. And so that's something that I want us to talk a little bit more about, because when we go to professional developments and things like that, I wasn't having these conversations. It's not like people meet each other as teachers and say like, hey, let me tell you about the time when I almost quit. Because they don't see that as inspiring, or it just doesn't really come up. It's more about like all the good things that you're supposed to be doing, or here are the good things that this person's doing, this rock star is doing over here. But it hasn't always been that way. And I want us to see and talk about those times where it's tough, because it's normal. Everybody goes through tough times. Different ways too. There's a lot of different ways that we're impacted by our surroundings and circumstances. Sometimes it's just burnout. Like I wasn't managing my calendar really well, or a lot of stuff came up. And then sometimes it's demoralization. So we'll get to it a little bit later. But a book I just read, and I got to plug this one, by Doris Santoro, is Demoralized: Why Teachers Leave the Profession They Love and How They Can Stay. I read that over the summer, and that showed me a lot of different ways and gave me a new way to think about the difficulty that teachers experience and why they experience it. Because they're teachers who are demoralized are living in a circumstance where they cannot realize their moral center as a professional educator, whether they're there for the students and advocating for them, or they just love the craft and they want it to be as good as they can be, but they're not able to do the things that they want to do, teach the curriculum the way they want to teach it, or advocate for a student the way they should be advocated for needs that are not being met on their behalf. So if the only category we have for teachers who are zapped of their energy is burnout, then that's not enough. Like burnout doesn't cover all of demoralization. And so we're missing what's going on, taking sort of like a child-sized blanket and trying to stretch it over our whole body to stay warm on a cold night. But demoralization is this new category. And that's kind of where my podcast is. I want to shift towards that. We're talking about these stories of demoralized, where teachers are unable to realize their moral center as a teacher. And this really just depletes them.
I think you're really onto something good there, because you think about, I'm thinking about the two terms of burnout and demoralization. And yeah, burnout, we often have more of a narrow interpretation, right? In terms of just too much work. And I think back to a story that Shane Lawrence shared about trying to run a film production at his school as a drama teacher and working up to 100 hours per week. And I think that's often sort of what we associate with burnout, is just that overwork. But demoralization sort of casts a much wider net, and I think that's so good. I love the take that you have on your show, Jeffrey, in terms of just looking at constructive solutions and taking a really thoughtful approach to these problems. It's not just sort of lamenting. You see a lot of these cheap memes and messages around teacher Twitter or Instagram about just how, again, burned out teachers are, overworked, longing for vacations and all of that kind of business. And there's some truth to that. Certainly at those intense moments of the school year, I think we all feel that in terms of reporting periods and so on. But we also need to take that thoughtful, constructive approach. And you do such a good job of that on your show. Thanks for that shout out of the book as well. I think we'll have to make sure that gets into the show notes. Again, that is Demoralization by Doris A. Santoro. Do I have that right?
Demoralized. Yeah.
Demoralized.
And then the other kind of concept behind the show is everybody loves transformation stories too. for a long time, I watched like Biggest Loser on TV, and I'll use that as an example where if you know somebody who is struggling with their weight, and then you see them like after time passes and they've lost a ton of weight, you're like, wow, you look great. That's fantastic. I'm so excited for you. What was your secret? And especially if you're seeing your story and their story too, like, I want to do that. Then like, how'd you do that? And then people will, tell their story, like, oh, I did this, I did that. And then sometimes we'll mimic that thing. So I want to do the same thing with when a teacher has these low moments or these moments where like, is teaching for me, or actually some of them quit and then they come back. How did you handle that? What would you say to somebody who's in your situation? And then we get a chance to, like, for some of us to go, oh, wow, maybe that was so simple. I haven't thought about doing that. Or now I have some hope. Like, I'm going to give that a try. And that's kind of the end result of the show. What they walk away with is maybe like a little piece of hope for what's next.
Well, that is timely content at a time, Jeffrey, when, as you know, there have been some really high-profile teacher resignations or quitting, and some blog posts written to that effect. And we see headlines in the news about high rates of teacher turnover in certain states. So this is valuable content, people. And if you haven't tuned in, if you haven't subscribed to the Dear Teacher Don't Give Up podcast, it is well worth the subscription. Jeffrey, you and I have also connected on Voxer about another issue, this whole business of how much is too much. And we're talking in particular here about sharing our professional learning with peers. I know on my staff team, I feel like I'm surrounded by keeners who are passionate about learning and growth. So in a way, it's a really safe place to share. Yet I definitely feel uncomfortable about the idea of, let's say constantly emailing or messaging about, hey, have you seen this blog post, or check out this YouTube video or this resource, and so on and so forth. None of us want to be that annoying person on our staff. And I so enjoyed you touching on this very issue in episode 7 of your podcast. So to teachers and educators who are bursting with learning and enthusiasm for growth, maybe they've been really turned on by edu-Twitter in the last year or two. Maybe they're just feeling on fire based on what they've been reading. What would you advise them about sharing with colleagues?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm gonna tell you another story, I think, here, but I'll be quick. In my 5th year of teaching, I was hired as the co-chair of my department. So let me just say this right now before I launch into the story, though. If you're bursting with ideas about how teaching can get even better, do not become a department chair. That's not the route to go. And let me tell you my story. So one of my goals as chair was to take what I was learning and bring it to my department. Basically, the deal I was trying to say was, here, I'll read the books, I'll do the research, and then I'll bring you some cool stuff, guys. It didn't land. And what I mean by that is some people would hear me out. And I think a lot of the people that I was working with, pretty much all of them, were like, that's a great idea. But that was about as far as it went, was just the affirmation that it's a great idea. I remember one time I was delivering a very simple way to do grammar instruction, and people were excited about it. And it was like early October. And one of the teachers in my department said, like, this is a great idea to do next year. And what she meant was next academic year. Like, I'll wait till we round the calendar and come back to fall next year to do that. And I was like, okay. Right. So thanks for that. So it wasn't landing. I also joined multi-site district committees to do the same kind of thing. That wasn't landing. I kept that up for about 8 years and doubled my time and energy on this effort over time. Like each year, just kind of putting more and more of myself in it. Nothing was happening. So speaking of demoralization, I wasn't realizing my moral center, which is I want to make the department, the school I work at, even better than it already is. So out of demoralization, I quit. But when I did, I kind of had this replacement plan. I was going to write a book and see what would happen with that. So I started a blog and created all my socials. And it was really, honestly, at the time, I was like, how am I going to get the word out about my book? Well, I need to kind of build a platform. But I was I was convinced that I wasn't the only teacher thinking this way. But now, mind you, I hadn't been on edu-Twitter or any of this stuff. I didn't know that whole thing existed. I thought, like most people, when they first discover edu-Twitter, most teachers, that they think it's like about celebrities kind of promoting themselves and just kind of funny memes and things like that. So that's kind of what I thought was going on. But there was a recommendation that you get on Twitter. So I said, all right, I'll sign up. But still, I was convinced that I could probably, there's other people out there that think the way that I do. I just haven't connected with the people in my physical space. So once I got connected to edgy Twitter, and like I found Star Saxton and Aaron Blackwelder and Arthur Chiaravali and Jennifer Gonzalez, and my world just opened up. So at this point, I was observing like this conversation, kind of lurking and learning from everyone, but not really part of it. And then I connected with Marissa Thompson after hearing about her instructionless classroom on Michelle Waters' Rethink ELA podcast. Sorry, Rethink ELA, said that kind of fast. And she showed me the Twitter ropes. So she's like, here, look at this Ed Chat. She would tag me into conversations, and she kind of showed me around Twitter. And I was like, yeah, hey, here are my people. They're out here. They're in different cities, in different time zones, sometimes different countries. And wow, I was right. They're out there. So we're connecting over shared, convictions and ideas. Eventually, I found my way into Voxer for a collaboration, and that's when I say things got deep. So what I mean by that is, first, it was just kind of a collaboration for a project, like just kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. But so Marissa showed me around Twitter, I showed her around Voxer, and we started collaborating with Dina Hess, well, now Lau. And then we just started to kind of connect on a level where we developed a friendship through Voxer. And I was like, okay, like it's kind of like I have my department at my brick and mortar location, and they challenge me in all kinds of ways. And I love working with them, and we're friends. But there was a part of me that wanted to be challenged in some other ways. And I got to know people that way through networking online, and then finding a space on Voxer to do that. So what I think is instructive about my story is that the constraints of my physical brick and mortar location were keeping me from realizing my moral center. It was a circumstance that was keeping me from accessing that part of me as a teacher. And when I realized I wasn't confined by my physical space, then I found my peeps, and it has given me a whole different outlook where I work too. So it's actually enhanced, I think, my work life on campus where I work as well, because what I was doing for years was pressuring the teachers in my building to come along with me, but they weren't there yet. Maybe they, have only been teaching a couple of years, or their moral center, their concern was not the same as mine. They had some other ones that were great and noble, and they need to be concerned about those things, and they need to pursue that. So before finding my PLN online, I wasn't respecting their journey, and I was pushing too hard for them to join me on my journey. And now I get to connect with new people and grow as a professional while staying right where I am, which makes my colleagues happier. And I'm no longer like a mopey husband and father at home, at least when it comes to work. So I feel like this has really just helped me figure out I get to realize a little bit more about actualize who I am as a teacher. But it saves everybody else from me trying to pressure that on the situation. Does that make sense?
It makes beautiful sense. And I love the whole bit about actualization, and I'm right there with you. I've experienced much the same, but if I can just bring it back to your current colleagues, I mean, I'm partly asking out of self-interest, Jeffrey, because I'm always sort of teasing this out in my own mind. So you're doing all of this podcast work, you're writing blog posts, you're coming across incredible stuff, game-changing stuff. Do you sort of have an unwritten internal rule about, okay, I'm just going to drop one thing a month? Or, I mean, do you ever email your colleagues with recommended resources?
Well, I have, and then I stopped because
completely.
Yeah, it was, I think I said that on my last episode too. It's like I would write book chapter sized emails to 6 people, and
right.
I don't know how much of it they would read. So, but it was good practice. It was good practice on my part. But I would say what I'll do, I'll kind of, there's a little dance I kind of do where somebody will say they've hit a snag or a problem. And if I believe I have a solution or can connect that person with the solution, then I will say like, oh, well, have you thought about, I'll kind of start with some questions and lead them into it. And I'm like, I have a resource. I could connect you with a resource. And then usually if they're like, oh yeah, send it my way, then that makes it a lot easier. So what I'll do is just sort of feel out who's asking and what they're asking for. And then I'll deliver it if they want to. Because one thing I've learned, Tim, over time, and this is just working with students, people, is that people aren't interested in answers to questions they aren't asking. So if I'm going to provide something for them, they better be asking for it, and then they're ready to receive it. Otherwise, I'm just being pushy.
I think that is the answer I was looking for. That's a great line, and that's something I can definitely take with me. You know, like I said at the outset, I'm blessed to work on a team with, I would say, some incredible keeners. And of all this is my fourth, let's say, faculty team that I've had the opportunity to work with, and this particular set of professionals is so exciting, and I'm definitely blessed. I would say there are maybe 4 or 5 in Edu Twitter. And that's right there sort of signals a certain appetite, let's say, for outside resources and voices. And so I know it's pretty safe to share ideas with that group. And then there are others that are writing blog posts. So I know it's safe to share good blog content with them. But I think that's what I'm going to take away from your answer is be careful about providing answers to questions that people are not asking. I like that. Jeffrey, as you look across your PLN and your own practice, what is setting you on fire about education today?
Well, for me, this is part of my journey too. It's removing points from my classroom. That's right. My class is pointless.
Yes.
So for me, wow, just this amazing game changer. I tried it this last year, and there's the whole teachers going gradeless movement, which I'm part of and have done my small part in contributing to. And there's been some conversation, you've referenced that Voxer chat earlier, where we've talked about gradeless itself isn't the best term. And it's definitely not one I use to talk to my students and the parents of my students about it, because I teach seniors. So I don't want to say like, hey, now that you've come to the end of your journey, no more grades. What? College transcripts, things like that. So I don't use that term. I say, hey, we have an alternative path to grades. And so I had to think, I'm going to take points out of my classroom. How is a student going to earn a grade? And so it's effort, purposeful effort, revision, reflection, and a conference with me. Oh, lots of feedback too. So feedback from peers and from me. So purposeful effort, feedback, reflection, revision, and a conference with me. And at the conference, we're going to negotiate. So I'm going to give you full voice in your grade, and we'll have a conversation. And I'd like to say it's 50-50, but there are some moments where, I say like, hey, I might exercise my right to say no and disagree, but that's always going to be through questions with me. It'll never be a blanket no. Or if it's like, hey, maybe we need to revisit this conversation later, which I haven't had that yet. But yeah, it was an amazing last year, and I'm just going to double down on that this year. So I did it last year, never going back. I realized the grade book that I had in my previous 13 years of teaching, that massive spreadsheet of assignments and points, was really the biggest factor in the narratives that I crafted about my students. It was also the biggest factor in the narrative that they craft about themselves as students too. So, and I realized I was getting a lot of those stories all wrong. So with no points between me and my students, I really got to know them, and I let them tell their stories without numbers. So like when it came to their learning story. So what was it that was, what this weekend or this month has kept you from getting your work done? And I would hear genuine, struggles that they were having, whether it was on campus with peers, on campus with another teacher, or something that had happened at home. They necessarily would go into all the detail, but they would at least let me know that there was something outside of school that was hurting them, or hurting their time and attention that they can put on school. And so, because I was noticing that if you've ever had a student who hasn't as a teacher, if they've been teaching for 10 years, a student who's really intelligent, really bright, hard worker, you can see that they're a hard worker, but the work isn't coming in, there's a story there. And I got to see that really for the first time this last year. So there's no way I'm going to go back, because I need to know these stories. I need to know what's affecting my learners. So I really got to know them, let them tell their stories. It opened my eyes to what they go through on a weekly basis. And so if the time that Mrs. Walters was chewing me out was like the first big shift in my growth and uncovering my biases, this alternative pathway to grades was the next big leap in my growth, to uncovering how I'm seeing students and making me look at myself as a teacher, and really making a big shift about what is learning, what is my job, what is my purpose as a teacher, those kinds of things. So it was huge in that, and I'm just going to keep doubling down on that practice.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for sharing that. I am so thankful to have made your acquaintance again over the last year. And even in recent weeks, we've connected a lot more through Voxer. And I've shared that I've taught for 18 years. Can't believe I've been teaching that long. But last year was my first year with no numbers essentially entering my grade book. And I teach eighth grade, most subjects. And so that was revolutionary for me. But I really appreciated your breakdown last week of just the differences in your view between feedback, assessment, and evaluation, and look forward to learning more. Jeffrey, keeping that same theme going, you talked about last year and then looking ahead to this year. Do you have a specific professional goal or a project that you're working on that you could share with us?
Yeah, last year was huge as far as my growth. So I feel like this year is a little bit more modest. So I'll keep maintaining what I've been doing, podcast, blogging. I'm also going to slowly work on my next book, title it Make Them Interact. So it'll be about how to have authentic, academically centered discussion in the classroom that also builds social skills and community. So you can do all of those things together. But again, that'll take me some time. So I'm not going to give you any projections right now. I'm also going to start offering professional development through presentations and workshops. And at this point, I'm still looking for my first gig. So that'll be me trying to figure out how I can show people that I have something to offer their community if they're interested, their organization, if they want to know a little bit more about how I do what I do in my classroom, and some practical ways and logistical ways to implement that in their classrooms too.
Very, very cool. Is that going back to your book and that whole topic of deeper engagement in the classroom? Is the TQE method going to figure into that?
It will in some way. I invited Marissa to collaborate with me on that, and she's going to play her part, I think, and it will show up in some way in that book. So yes, her and I have been working together, and we recently did a presentation that brought my protocol, ongoing conversations, together with her protocol, TQE method, and showing principals and site level administrators ways that you can simply and logistically have more student voice and choice in the classroom that is academically centered, and again, like I said, grows community too. So yeah, that'll show up in some way in that book for sure.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to that. I'll definitely be a customer as well when that book shows up on Amazon.
Thank you.
Outside of education, Jeffrey, what's another area of learning for you? And here I'm looking for something that really brings you alive as a human being, completely outside of education, if you can go there.
Yeah, I'd say that's like not fair because I'm writing, podcasting, speaking, all about education, which I love. I mean, those are all adventures in themselves too. That's the content is education, but yeah, all those things are so much fun. But I'd say outside of education entirely, it's getting a grip on being a dad of 4 kids who are 10, 8, 5, and 8 months old. So, and it's a lot of fun. But it's very challenging. So this summer has been, how can we keep them from injuring themselves at the pool, which with 2 out of 4 kids, we've been successful. So if we were grading this, I'm getting a 2 out of 4. I think we could do better. But the other thing that I do too, really grew in this last year was sound engineering. So, and I do that at my church on Sundays. I'm the guy in the back dressed in black, adjusting all those switches and dials. And that sound is something that I can geek out about just as much as I do about teaching. So there are a couple sound guys that I hang out with, and we'll get into frequencies and effects and things like that. It can get really, really geeky. So yeah, that's something else that I'm really interested in too.
You're the sound guy. That's very cool. Share about a personal habit or a productivity hack, Jeffrey, that contributes to your success. How do you get it all done, man?
Wake up early. I mean, that's the advice that I have, is just get up early. I think I heard it from Jon Acuff, who's an author who does, productivity and stuff like that. He says, you can be selfish at 5 a.m. And what he means by that is, no, my kids aren't asking me to have them ride a bike or sit down and color with them or read them a story. They're asleep. And so that's the time when I can get some things done. So it means I go to bed earlier, and I do drink probably more coffee than a doctor would tell me to, but getting up early is the productivity hack there.
All right, love it. So my follow-up question to that one is always, what is your sleep window? Is it 9 to 4:30, or what are you doing these days? Or during the school year, I should ask.
Oh, no. Now I have to say it out loud. So here's what I would like to do would be 9:30 to 4 in the morning. What really happens is more like 11 to 4.
Ooh,
So, and then, yeah, I know it's rough. That's why I hit the coffee pretty hard. So,
that is tough. I can do 5 hours, Jeffrey, maybe 1 or 2 nights in a row, but after that, I'm done. So, but I'm there with you. I've sort of become a miracle morning guy as well in the last year or two. And when you're on it, it is transformative what you can accomplish before the day even begins. Just before we continue, I want to share an important message from the Teach Better team. Are you looking to reach more students, innovate your instruction, and teach better? Then join the Teach Better team on November 8th and 9th in Northeast Ohio for the first ever Teach Better conference. Join dynamic educators such as Dave Burgess, Tal Thompson, Adam Welcome, and more. Register now at teachbetterconference.com. When you do, be sure to use discount code FIRE50, that's FIRE50, to save $50 on either of the 2-day registration options. Once again, that's teachbetterconference.com. Are you ready to be better? Jeffrey, it's time for your quick picks, and here we want to know the education voices and resources that are shaping your practice and inspiring your thinking today. So thinking back to how Marissa Thompson sort of walked you through Edu Twitter and showed you around, let's start there. Tell us about someone we should follow and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
yeah, well, I recently attended a conference I presented at, but I also met a few other presenters and had lunch with 3 people that I think everybody should be following. First is Damon Qualls, or at DM Qualls. He's an incredible principal of Mona View Elementary in Greenville, South Carolina, and his story is so inspiring. Really, the whole district, how they sort of transformed their principals to leaders of learning. And then he came into a school that was, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's something like they were performing at proficiency level of about 23%, and he had double-digit increases over 3 years, and he's got them to like 55%.
Wow.
In 3 years proficient. Yeah, it's an incredible story. And then also he's really, they had constraints with budget. So he got on Donors Choose, and he had his staff get on Donors Choose. And in 2 years, they raised over $200,000 for their school. And they even ended up on Stephen Colbert's show. And he came out and kind of said, like, told his story. And then he like flash funded all of South Carolina's Donors Choose projects because of what like Damon Qualls had done. So it's an amazing story. I'd love to hear it. In addition, are Marin Dawes and Kathleen Beachboard. They have a book due out here in a couple months, I think. 10 Keys to Student Empowerment, Unlocking the Hero in Each Child. So one of the things that really impressed me about them is they go into their community and they ask stakeholders in the community, especially nonprofits, what are some problems that you have? And then they collect a bunch of problems and they bring it back to their students to present as, PBL, project-based learning. Is, hey, kids, which ones do you guys care about? And then they get them grouped up and then they go for it. And they've done some incredible things. Like one particular group was, I can't remember exactly the focus of it, but this nonprofit was running out of money and they were going to have to close their doors. And the students came together and put together a project that will keep them funded indefinitely, so that they can keep doing what they're doing. It's incredible what they did. They have the hashtag as Unlocking Heroes. And so again, that's Marin Dawes and Kathleen Beachboard. And they're worth a follow, and their book is definitely going to be something that I'll be picking up as I start thinking through more project-based learning for my students too.
That sounds awesome. Point us to an EdTech tool that you currently love using in your classroom or your professional practice. Jeffrey, is there an app or a platform that is really transforming learning in your classroom?
I'm going to go to the best EdTech tool that I think has been around for a long time before apps. It was whiteboards and Post-its. That's I'm going to go, low tech on this one. I mean, it is tech, but having students being able to revise ideas right there, move them around. And it's a great collaborative piece too. Get them around a whiteboard, get them around a table with some Post-its, and they get to kind of, this is what we do as learners. It shouldn't be so evaluative all the time. And this is a way for them to sort of play with ideas. So I'm going to go low tech and say whiteboards and Post-its. I know Trevor Aleo will like that one. So
next, Jeffrey, fuel my Kindle addiction. Recommend a book that you've been reading lately, or maybe one of your all-time faves, and tell us why you recommend it.
Demoralized. I'm going to hit that one again. I think it just gave me a new way to think about what was going on with teachers' experiences. And so they're like, for instance, if you see a faculty member in a faculty meeting, and they have some pointed questions and maybe they're a little heated and they're getting there might be upset about some new change or something like that. There actually might be, it's not that they're being resistant. It might be because something that is being presented is conflicting with their moral center. And so for me, I might want to, like, if I have a relationship with that person, be like, hey, what's going on? And then be able to talk them through it. Like, oh, yeah, wow. Not get on their case or like join sort of the posse that's going to bully them into silence, but to say like, here, tell me your story. I want to hear more about it. And then I like business books too, when I'm not reading ed books. And one I picked up recently was a lot of fun, was From Poop to Gold. That's right. That's a business book. It's the Harmon brothers. They do the really funny ads that you see that go viral online, and just their philosophy of how they work and their organization works. And it was just a lot of fun to listen to.
Jeffrey, I have a theory that every podcast producer began as a podcast fan. So tell us what you've got in your deck, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you're listening. What's at the top of your list?
Right now, I'm really enjoying Dropping the Gloves with John Scott. I'm a huge hockey fan, and I'm from the Bay Area, so sorry to say this because I know this isn't your team, but I'm a huge San Jose Sharks fan. And I fell in love with John Scott when he was on San Jose. And then there was that story of the All-Star fan vote gone wrong or gone right, depending on your position. And that was so much fun to watch. And I really fell in love with him then. And now he's got a podcast, and it's really fun to listen to him talk for real about what's really going on in the NHL. And then also all the goofy little rabbit trails that he gets on just because I love the guy.
I will have to check that one out. I have to say, not a Sharks fan myself, but I'm sad for you guys that you lost Joe Pavelski this year.
Yeah.
Definitely a character guy that I've appreciated for a long time.
You had to bring that up. You had to bring it up.
Yeah, sorry. Tell us about a YouTube channel that you enjoy. And, I'm all about, I always talk to teachers, Jeffrey, about the importance of subscribing to channels. Otherwise, your recommended list just fills up with nonsense. So tell us about a channel that we can add to our list.
Well, coming from my Protestant background, this channel is not related to education directly, but it's the Bible Project. And what the Bible Project offers are short, beautifully crafted, animated videos for every book of the Bible and different topics that span the whole Bible. And I grew up reading the Bible, and I thought I was biblically literate until I watched these videos, and I went, whoa. I mean, it really deepened my learning. There's possibilities that it could come up in the classroom. There's one time where I was teaching and students didn't know a particular biblical reference, and it was fairly important for the story that we were reading. So I slowed down for 3 minutes and showed them a quick video on Job, and they all got it, and it deepened our understanding a little bit. So great channel, lots and lots of learning for somebody who likes to learn more about the Bible.
Yeah, I'm going to second that one as well. Love the Bible Project. And then last question, Jeffrey, is strictly non-educational, just for fun. What are you watching on Netflix these days?
Well, I told you about the 4 kids earlier. So
right.
What's on Netflix is usually right now, it's Sophia the First, but I'm only joining in occasionally on that one. So I don't do a whole lot of Netflix watching. But one thing I have been sort of binging on lately, I'm reliving my childhood, sort of. We're playing Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I'm playing it, and the kids are watching me. So it's like they're watching TV, and I get to play video games. I mean, what a match made in heaven, I think. So they're enjoying that, and I'm just having fun, just getting lost in that world again. So
that's great. I'm sure my boys would be very interested if I picked up Legend of Zelda and some of those classic games as well. Jeffrey, for those listening who have enjoyed what you've had to share in this conversation and maybe hear the voice of a kindred spirit, what are the best ways for them to connect with you?
For starters, Twitter. So you already alluded to this, but at Make Them Master It, no E in master, they wouldn't let me put it in there. MakeThemMasterIt.com is where my content is, and I love comments there. So come interact with me there. I'm fairly responsive. I do have a Facebook page at Make Them Master It, so you can go find me there. You're getting a theme here, the Make Them Master It stuff. And then the book that this is really niche, so if you're looking to do writer's notebook, especially with high school students, and for me, I got the logistics all wrong for, 4 or 5 iterations of it, and I finally figured it out. Check out Make Them Process It. And then if you're bold enough to find me on Voxer, Make Them Master. I couldn't put the it there. So that's where we are.
All right. Well, you might cringe at this word, but that is effective branding, Jeffrey. And I'm glad that some time ago, you can't remember if you were directed to, but you decided to get out onto the socials. And certainly when it comes to sharing ideas and creating content and putting books out there, it's kind of a necessity. So I'm so glad that you've expanded your PLN and that as a result of that, we cross paths. Thank you so much for sharing your time with the podcast today. I've thoroughly enjoyed engaging with you in real time, and it's been wonderful to connect. I look forward to more learning together in the future. So take care, Jeffrey, and let's talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks for this opportunity to come on and share a little bit about what I do.
Thanks for joining me today here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. For show notes and links from this episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And again, please do subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode was brought to you by ClassTime.com, an assessment platform that delivers learning insights, giving you more time to teach. ClassTime helps you gain immediate visibility of your students' learning progress, build engaging lessons, share with other teachers, and create your own tech-enabled questions to complement your lesson plans. ClassTime.com also helps you engage all students with collaborative challenges and puzzles that make fun an integral part of the learning experience. Start for free at ClassTime.com today. Just before we sign off, I'd like to share highlights from around the Teachers on Fire community this week. First of all, I'd like to thank all those who encourage and support the podcast on Twitter, and that's really where I make my home throughout the week. Kim Britton at Kim Britton EDU, that's Britton, so Kim Britton EDU recently tweeted, just listen to Janelle McLaughlin on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Coaches need coaching. Made me so thankful for at go_ALET and the hashtag ALTIC beta cohort and all I have learned the past year. Can't wait for fall conference, hashtag ET coaches. And I should mention that when she called out Janelle McLaughlin, she actually used Janelle's Twitter handle, which is at @MS_Mac4. And of course, Janelle was our guest on episode 94 of the podcast. And next on Twitter, Sarah Ahern, I hope I'm saying that right, at Sarah S.J. Ahern, AHERNE, tweeted, Teachers on Fire, just listen to at Ray Hewert's recommendation of at Mr. Adam Welcome and video newsletters. Mind blown. Can't wait to try with my class. Well, thank you for that, Sarah. I like that idea as well. I'm thinking about how I might be able to use that in my own practice this year. So thank you, Mr. Adam Welcome, for getting us talking and thinking about video newsletters. Moving from Twitter over to Instagram, I don't always stop here, but I do want to shout out a couple of comments this week. On Friday, I posted a video clip of Justin Belt, a guest from episode 95 of the Teachers on Fire podcast, discussing the importance and power of accessing our why as educators. And so this was just a short clip, but it was potent and poignant and everything else. Kelly Barry at KBAHRI6 commented, complete awesomeness. Justin Belt motivates, supports, and encourages educators to be their best. Stay true to your why. And Janelle McLaughlin, as I mentioned, good friend of this show at Janelle_MCL, said, I listened and loved it. And back on the post for episode 95 with Justin Belt, at The Right Leader commented, totally digging the work of at Iam.Mr. that's Justin Belt on Instagram, and his podcast at The Ycast, keep inspiring, guiding, and elevating people. So thank you for that as well. To all of you, to all 5 of you, Sarah, Kim, Kelly, Janelle, and Vernon, thank you so much for your comments and engagement. You 5 were the fuel to my fire this week. And if you do drop in on my stuff anywhere across social media, if you are a liker or a retweeter or commenter, again, thank you so much for your contributions. You know, as edu-podcasters, we see the download numbers each week, and I have to tell you, those have been great lately, smashing some new records here at Teachers on Fire, but nothing beats hearing back from people, actual human beings, that the show is making a difference in their life and practice. So I appreciate every positive comment. Keep them coming, please. Well, I hope by now that if you're an education blogger or reader of education blogs, you've heard about the Teacher Blogs podcast, a podcast for teachers who have more time to listen to blog posts than to read them. The mission of this podcast is to amplify the voices of education writers that are seen, read, but need to be heard. Last week's episodes featured posts from Brian Carpenter at Brian Carr. He published Why I Created #FreshAir@5. Riley Duick at Mr. Riley Duick published One Math Test, One Math Question, and Chris McNutt at McNutt GISA published Starting Off Right, Writing a Pro-Student Syllabus. And I should mention all of those handles were on Twitter, not Instagram, but those were on Twitter, and wonderful pieces from all three educators. I could go into each of them, but again, make sure you subscribe to the Teacher Blogs podcast and hear these pieces written in the voices of the authors. And I still think it is so cool. I'm a little biased, but I love listening to these writers share their ideas. Your voice could be next, educator, if you are a blogger and you would like to have your piece featured. All you need to do is use your phone's voice memo app to record yourself reading your own blog post. Then use the share button to email the voice file to teacherblogspodcast@gmail.com. If you've written a blog post that you'd like me to consider featuring there, please message me at teacher_blogs on Twitter. Speaking of blogs, make sure to stop by the Teachers on Fire magazine on Medium. This week we featured Facing Fears, a vulnerable piece by Justin Belt about the experience of starting a new school year in a completely new education community. And another piece, What I Learned from Going Standards-Based by Caitlin Giordano. And I continue to learn from Caitlin in the whole area of assessment. Let me tell you, she brings the value in this one. Two great articles worth checking out on the Teachers on Fire magazine. And if you're wondering where that is or where to find it, the Teachers on Fire magazine is a Medium publication. You'll find it on medium.com or on the Medium app. If you're already an education blogger, consider joining our growing writing team there. The good news is you can continue to publish content on your own blog and then either copy that same content or publish original content over on Medium, where you keep full credit and ownership of all of your pieces. Message me at Teachers on Fire on any social media platform for more details and to get started. It really is a quick process to get you up and going. One last thing, something I have not done a very good job of in terms of promoting this podcast is asking my listeners to leave reviews of the show on Apple Podcasts. So if you are listening on an iPhone right now, would you kindly take a moment to leave me a 5-star rating and let me know what you appreciate most about Teachers on Fire? I'd be incredibly grateful and would love to shout you out in this space on a future episode. By the way, Android Nation, I'm not forgetting about you wonderful people and all the other many platforms and apps you might listen on, including Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Podbean, Breaker, or my personal favorite at the moment, CastBox. The reason so many edu-podcasters mention Apple Podcasts is simply that for better or for worse, Apple is far and away the king of the podcast world. I know, groan and moan, Android Nation. That's the way it is for the time being. But listen, your ratings and rankings on other platforms matter and they help me as well. So please, if you don't mind giving it a like, I know Spotify allows a little like or a review. If that opportunity exists, I want to thank you for doing that as well. Again, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that in some way the content and conversation you heard today from Jeffery Frieden ignited your thinking and inspired your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care and have a great week.